Welcome to Northern Powerhouses, our business success stories series of interviews where we discuss with local business leaders their backgrounds, their successes and their challenges and what's really driving them forwards. And this afternoon, I'm delighted to have with us Matthew Ward, who's director at IC Blue. So Matthew, firstly, thank you for spending some time with us. If you'd like to introduce yourself and IC Blue and how you help people, that would be great.
Not at all. Thank you for having me. My name is Matthew. IC Blue is predominantly a component distributor that is based in Leeds, but is predominantly export. We're 90% export. We have 22 different languages spoken in-house. We have multiple offices throughout Europe. And we started in 2003 in a spare room of an apartment in Leeds city centre. I was doing bar work at the time, finishing my degree. I met my now business partner, and he was from within the industry. And we started the business in the spare room of his apartment. And I worked doing that during the day, and I still worked in the bar at night. And we did that for the first year, mainly doing supply chain management solutions for predominantly German companies at the time. So if you needed whatever you'd be making a PCB board, you'd be making an item involving electronics, and you'd have a supply chain problem with an item on that board, we would try and solve it for you. But it was very much a brokering model. And that took us to the first couple of years, and we started to recruit and grow, and still doing that supply chain management brokering element. But then we started to hold some stock, and we just decided to grow linguistically. The UK market at the time was going from a period of mass production to very specific technical low volume production, and we just found it easier to build a customer base with an export business model. And Leeds in the early 2000s, as it was right up to sort of Brexit really, was a fantastic place to grow and recruit young people from throughout Europe with language skills which weren't industry specific. And that's what's taken us to this point now. We supply the medical industry, aerospace, defense, industrial, consumer goods. If you are a company using ICs, semiconductors, and you have supply chain issues, which everyone does, then we have a service to offer to you. In addition to the supply chain management side, we are the only company in the UK that is under contract with Siemens to support their PCB design software and their simulation software. So within that business segment, we have all the F1 companies, and we deal with anyone involved in PCB design and simulation. So if you want to design a circuit board to go in an aircraft at 50,000 feet, and you want to know what happens to those components after being running for however many hours, we have the software to be able to simulate how fluid dynamics and aerodynamics would work on that board, and how heating and cooling would influence it. So it creates a lot quicker innovation, and it means that prototyping has to be reduced. And the third part of the business is we deal with, we call it asset management, and it's to do with post-production assets, which would be from, if you stop making a certain size TV, you move on to a new item, you've still got a load of components that could make those TVs. We will do a asset management program on those and get those available back into the market. And this is why you have second and third and fourth tier brands you might not have heard of, but it's where, you know, the supermarkets might get their brands from, but they're using the same semiconductors as, say, Sony would use. They're just from a historical unit. And so that sort of massages the supply chain issues in the current market that we're seeing, and gives value back to the customer based on their redundant stock. Wow.
What a service and what a story from as you say, from your business partner's back bedroom. And the sort of growth you've achieved has been quite significant, especially over the last few years, I believe.
Yeah, so pre-COVID, we were operating at about 9-10 million turnover, having about 950 customers throughout Europe. We've just finished yesterday our 19th year in operation, and we've just done 39.5 million turnover, and increased from 32 staff pre-COVID to 50 staff now. And we have a second site that we commissioned during COVID in Holbeck, a 10,000 square foot state-of-the-art inspection and storage facility, partly down to a requirement for us to separate our working arrangements because we needed to be operational during COVID because we were supplying the medical industry, but we couldn't have the concentration of people in one building. So if we separated our logistics from our sales and administration, which was working mostly remotely, then that business continuity was assured. So we used the government support elements and general trading to heavily invest in infrastructure during that period.
Wow. And I mean, it's fascinating that growth that you've achieved. You were talking briefly before we started, and the 3, potentially 4 significant events I don't think we're going to see in another generation for many generations, i.e. Brexit, COVID, the war in Ukraine, and that has a knock-on effect to the energy challenge and crisis. And yet you've seen this significant growth. What are some of the things that you've done, would you say, are some of the secrets to achieving that growth?
Well, yeah, it's been one existential crisis to another, effectively. COVID was challenging for every businesses. Luckily, because we have some offices in Europe and we've grown linguistically, the infrastructure was based around people not having to be sedentary in one location. So the fact that we had to move everyone out with the office had technical challenges, but it was overcomable, basically. But all the product we buy and sell has to come through the UK, and it comes to Leeds. It has to get inspected, and it has to get verified, and has to get sent out. So there was a manual process in there. So we couldn't just fully be remote. And that made Brexit and our trading relationship with Europe, even though Europe is our biggest trading partner as a company, we'd done everything we should have done to prepare the company for the new trading relationship. The blind side was that our customers weren't prepared. They just hadn't taken on board that they'd have to pay local VAT, for example. And that was very challenging. And there was a communication issue for a few months to start with. And that was our blind side. Speak to the customers, are you ready for this? We want to continue trading. They'd say, yeah, of course, we buy from loads of people or whatever, or throughout the world. And when it came down to it, they really hadn't considered the fact that they'd be paying VAT on their importation. Even if they were giving it back, it had massive cash flow problems. So we actually have set up a separate legal entity within the Netherlands. So the company now takes the responsibility for entering the Eurozone. And then we do it as a domestic Eurozone shipment from within the Netherlands. That was done in conjunction with the Department of Trade and Industry and DHL primarily to create that as a facility. So Brexit happened on March 31st, sorry, January 31st of that year. By April, we were fully operational with this new legal entity and set up and operating. But that was really seat of the pants, a couple of months. It was stressful. COVID sort of massaged it because everything was everything was up in the air anyway. But and then we went from that straight into the global supply chain issues that we are seeing now, that you'll have seen in the news about even the tanker in the Suez was causing massive problems with movement of product to Europe from Asia. And that's compounded even further with zero COVID policy in China, stopping production, and the facilities that are involved in our industry that you can't just flick on a light switch and get them going. It's weeks to run them down, and it's weeks to ramp them up. So, and that's the current one of the war in Ukraine. I don't think people realize how much manufacturing was actually done in Ukraine, especially within the automotive sector. Most of your dashboard systems of any automotive brand were produced in Ukraine.
Wow, didn't know that.
So that's been worked through, but that's caused a big imbalance between the consumer nations or high consumer nations of Europe and the US and America, bouncing back from COVID pretty quickly in terms of their demand, and the big producing nations still suffering. And if you talk even further back, the raw materials are coming from lots of it coming from Africa and the Far East, and they're not producing the raw materials to get them into the technical components that are required to get them into products for Europe and the US predominantly to buy. So it's really compounded the fact that we're in a globalized economy, and we have been able to grow in that period, but we've also picked up customers. Our top 13 customers, 7 of them are new business from this year. So the market's opened up because people are willing to explore new supply options because their traditional forms of supply haven't existed. So companies have been knocking on the door for many years and been dismissed from. We're now considered, front and center. As a company, as an independent distributor, there's always the accusations or that we're operating in the grey market and the traceability element and security elements of that within that. But we're aligned with the aerospace and defence sectors, and we have been since inception. So we've been operating to the highest market reliability elements.
Yes.
And that message has been struggled to get through to your sort of top tier customers until something like this happens and their supply chains can't cope or source. I mean, we're actually buying a lot of our stock that we're able to get hold of, because people ask me, "Oh, you're in the semiconductor industry, you must be struggling." And we're not, because we're actually purchasing from our existing customer base their excess stock. So we've been using the same system for 20 years. Everyone who's ever asked us for anything is logged in there. So we're phoning up those people saying, "You asked us for something in 2005. Do you still have any from your own production left over?" Yes. And they'll say, "Yeah, I've got 100 left." So it's fine. I'll pay you more than you paid for it back then. And then I'm selling it to someone who actually needs it now. So, I mean, these aren't reused stock. This is new product that's been kept in a climate controlled condition. It's not, it's not substandard, but this is the oil that's massaging the global supply chains at the moment, is the fact that companies can get asset back from their redundant stock.
Fascinating. I mean, it sounds from what one of the biggest, routes to success is solving people's problems, isn't it? I mean, that's what we do, and it feels like what your whole methodology and the different divisions you created is about finding a client's problems and solving them, and that feels like that's a big part of your success.
Yeah, very, very much so. And it's being agile enough to respond to what their own requirements are within their own vertical and geographic location. A massive tenet to our success is having native language speakers, having that workforce that's communicating with a cultural nod to how business is done in that area, which we all have to be sympathetic to. And having those native language speakers. It's been fantastic, and that does now sort of present a problem with our growth going forward, because recruiting is more difficult at the moment. And since Brexit, the same advert I put out in the market, which has been salary adjusted for current times, we used to get hundreds of applications, of which I'd whittle it down to 25 odd that would be telephone interviewed, invite 10 in, and we'd take 6 on, and that's how we did it. And every year, that's how we did it. That just doesn't happen. We haven't got the volume of inquiries through. We have the volume of applications. So we're now working as a company about our brand presence, which we've never had to really do before as an export focused business. Who are we locally, and how do people find out about us? Because people looking for jobs now, they want to Google you and see what the company's like, and they want to be making the right choices for them. And our presence is important as part of that scrutiny journey.
100%. I mean, we do a lot of work with businesses. We have done for a long time, but also especially now about recruitment and retention. And I think the key thing for me is being clear on our vision, on our values, because those are the things that will engage people to join us and to stay. Previously it was probably just more about the job and the role, but nowadays people want to know that they're contributing to something and they're working towards something, I feel. And the classic is typically, traditional recruiting is recruiting on experience but sacking on attitude. And our proposition is, look, with a base level of qualification or experience, let's go for the people that love to work, that engage with our vision and our values and want to work with us for a long time to achieve the goals that we have.
Yeah, we recruit for character and train for competence. You can't recruit anyone with the skill set to do what we do, but we know the character makeup of somebody that would be successful. We use psychometric testing quite a lot, not to recruit at all. This is done post recruitment, onboarding. We use Insights, which is a 4-color diagnostic tool. I pass my profile over to the person at onboarding, and their team members do as well, and it's shared. And it's an internal vernacular really, or a communication which transcends language barriers or whatever. It's and it's not pejorative because it's colours, and it's just we're all a makeup of all of them. But if I had to say one of the tenets of this success journey that we're on, or this journey that we're on currently manifesting itself successfully, is that communication tool. And we use it a lot with responding to customers and be able to mirror how they want information delivered, but also internally how to overcome tricky situations.
Bang on. I mean, likewise, we do a lot of work with Insight. We use the Thomas International DISC, which relates directly to red, yellow, green, and blue. And the most successful engagements of that is exactly that, when it becomes a communication protocol and it's a description of behavior, and also it's a description of behavior, Matthew. So when we're talking about something, let's say an unhelpful behavior, it's the behavior that's unhelpful, not the person. And it means that we don't then tag people with an identity they don't have. It's just that's very red or that's very yellow. Right now we need to be a little bit more green or blue or whatever it might be. And it really creates, as you say, a way that teams can really bond and develop and value the difference, because any team that was made up by only one color is pretty much destined to fail, whichever color it would be. Therefore the mix is so key. So valuing other people's behavioral makeup is so important, I think.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The identifying blind side section is used weekly, if not almost daily. And it was a bit of a struggle getting it over the line to start with.
Yes.
Getting that adoption of any new system within an organization. But I'd recommend any company to investigate whether they could improve their communication from using a tool like this. And it's a signaler. It's not a black and white, but in our experience, it's really helped move conversations along quicker.
I absolutely agree. It's been fascinating. I know, looking back on my first business and some of the challenges I had with other people not knowing about this whole behavioral profiling and analysis, looking back, there were some really challenging situations that I didn't solve at the time that I could have solved if I just understood what I now believe to be the other person's behavior at the time. And it almost to a point of being a bit, just it's almost like a no-brainer, but only when you have this knowledge. So I totally cool that I didn't cover that situation well then, because I didn't have the knowledge I have now. But it's absolutely fascinating. And things like, and you're probably aware of this, we can under pressure change behaviors from dominant to next dominant, and you can see a significant change in someone's behavior under pressure and not really understand why, because if they follow a particular behavior most of the time and then all of a sudden they change, it'd be quite so. I think it's great. Any organization that uses that, as you say, for guidance and communication, not necessarily for selection, is bang on, because there isn't a right or wrong behavior for anything. It's just understanding what that might mean in a certain situation and environment.
I agree. So I mean, that using that as we do, and also our apprentice program, I would give the credit to being strategy wise to the most significant impacting strategies of the last 20 years, but certainly of the last 10 years. Our apprentice program, which most people think of, or did 10 years ago anyway, think of vocational apprenticeships only, and not necessarily for business administration or logistics or any of those areas of the business that we require. And we're very proud of our apprenticeship program, that they'll come out with a qualification, but also on-the-job experience. And even our number 2 in the finance department, he came in as a 17-year-old, chose to do this instead of A-levels, or maybe just on A-levels, but hadn't performed so well, and came into the apprenticeship program, and now he's a fully qualified accountant, and managing a £40 million turnover business as part of that business unit. It's just one example, and for being in an industry that isn't immediately identifiable, to give people the option of entry into that market or into that industry, I think it's been very valuable for us.
Brilliant. No, that sounds great. I don't know if you've seen this, but I remember looking back on our business when we got to the over to the 100 people, is to some extent the changes in the ability to lead and manage that size of organization. So I remember getting, you know, up to about 20 people. We pretty much knew everything about them. We knew their partners, their families, their dogs, and then you get to sort of about 50 and you start to not be able to necessarily know everything about everybody. You still probably know everybody, but you don't necessarily know. And then I remember getting to sort of close to 100 and you just, new people appear and you just don't even know who they are or where they've come from. And it's quite different, especially sort of if you're quite people oriented, maybe quite yellow. It's like wanting to know that, but not really being able to. I don't know if that's a challenge you've overcome.
Yeah, I fully agree. Pre-COVID, the business felt more like a family firm that had grown up together. Yes. Our staff retention was very good, staff turnover very low, and if people did leave, there was always there was a reason why you relocated country or whatever was going on. Yeah. But it was very much a family feel, yeah. And it became very clear when we were going through our growth period, because we went from 9-10. Last year ended at 16, and this year at 39.5 million turnover, and that is problematic in the strains and stresses in conjunction with the existential crises that we've already discussed. Yes. And I spoke to everyone about it and just said, how do we manage this together? You know, I need this middle management team building. It is going to move people around, but we need to know that the end goal is that all decisions don't end with Andrew and myself and the FD. Yeah. There has to be a layer in between to allow us to focus on other areas. And it was a stressful time. I was slightly worried about how it would be received or adopted, but we've actually managed to upskill and from within. Basically, we didn't actually need to recruit externally. Right. And now the general manager position is new. We've got a new purchasing manager. We've now got an office manager, which is a role that it's a semi-nice to have role, but I don't understand how we've survived for 20 years without one, because they do all the stuff that I'd like to do, but then I can't have time to or forget about. Yeah. And the feel factor, the culture factor, isn't just about let's all go down to the pub on a Friday afternoon or whatever. It's the little bits. It's acknowledging birthdays, bereavements, moving house. It's having someone looking after the sort of the I don't want to say softer side of the business, but the humanitarian element internally. Yeah. She's doing a fantastic job, and that was, she was coming back from maternity, Rosa at the time, and she was coming in, and the roles that she was doing beforehand had slightly adapted anyway, and now she was sort of born to do this role, and we've sort of found that with everyone else that we've moved in as well. You give them the scope, you show them that it's okay to fail, because they weren't recruited at that level. They were upskilled internally, and then it's been I'd recommend any business to entertain something like that, because pleasantly surprised throughout is the end result.
Brilliant. And as well as, obviously, we've talked about a few things here, but what are some of the biggest learnings you've had about business in general? Is there any sort of key tips or anything that you have been?
It's interesting, actually. It's a receptiveness and willingness to fail, receptiveness to change and focus. And it goes through phases, isn't it? If you're starting off in your career, you need to be that person that just always says yes, that's open, that will try anything once. Fear of failure is holding everyone back. You shouldn't be afraid of the phone. You shouldn't be afraid of failure. And life and business will throw different things to you. And the last 18 months have shown us that there's stuff that even people hadn't even thought about being thrown at businesses. But the good survive, and the good rise to the top, and the ones that will adapt, even how difficult that adaptation is, will thrive.
Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Absolutely great. And you're probably where we're a coaching organisation. I'm keen to know who the best coaches you've worked with, whether that's business, sport, or life in general.
So, from a business perspective,
Or sport or
No.
life? Is there, who are the people
Right,
that have
okay.
the impact on you?
Well, the guy who delivers our insights program, a guy called Dan Oakley, Movintis Consulting, and he was done from a referral from another company in Leeds. He's been really good over the years, coming back and seeing us. And when we first got him involved, there was less than 20 of us or 20 of us, and then now it's 50. So it's quite interesting. He's really grown with the business as well.
Brilliant.
Understands how we operate, and we have a business coach from a company called the Excellence Partnership, David Hood, who manages our aerospace certifications, and he's been very good at challenging the business about how we can, because he deals with businesses that on companies like Rolls-Royce and the rest of it, and you think, oh well, what materially can we get from how they operate their teams of businesses or whatever? But actually, when you strip it all down, businesses are still doing the same thing. It's about communication flow. It's about being able to hit or do whatever you say you can do, and that's whether you're in a corner shop or you're in Tesco's. It's still the same processes involved. We say this to apprentices or new people coming in, that what you'll learn here and what you're exposed to, every trading company in the world operates largely the same way. So if you get the basics right, it's all scalable.
Yep, 100%. I think it was Branson said that something like the principles of business are all the same. So once you've mastered one, you can create as many as you choose to. It's a similar process, and obviously you've got to adapt to that to around that process for the particular business. But it's true. We all need to find customers find prospects through marketing, convert them through sales, deliver our products and service, get paid, keep our team happy, keep our customers happy. All those principles are exactly the same. It's just the modification for each business.
And it's a brave new world, even with people. I don't consider myself old at all, but people coming through into the world of work now, 18, 19, 20 of my apprentices and young people like that, they've got a whole different outlook and view of how things are done or how to actually market to their age group. And I know we're not involved in consumer goods, as in we don't sell B2C. Yeah, but there's knowledge and there's experience that applies to B2B, because the new buyers going into businesses operate in a different way. They don't use the phone so much. They want information delivered in a different way. It's society is developing outside of a business's constraints, and we're all people organizations at the end of the day. And if you forget that, then you lose your customer, even if the company's been your customer for years. If you don't get on with the person that's new into that role, that is the buyer, or the person you're interfacing with, the decision maker that actually doing it, then any account's open for grabs. That presents an opportunity too, because our competitors are finding the same thing.
Bang on. Sorry, go on.
No, so what happens in this sort of business cycle is everyone opens their door to new suppliers because they're desperate. And then as supply demand balances even out slightly, then some companies try to close that door again, and they go a more restrictive supply chain policy. Yeah. But being the people organized, if you develop a relationship with the person, they go, well, actually, when I really needed them, these guys really helped. Yes. And no, it just seems a bit unfair that I'm not giving them the chance now, even when they gave us a cost advantage, a price advantage. They were able to supply when our traditional people couldn't supply. All these other aspects, they mean something. So it's adversity creates a time to shine.
Yeah, without doubt. I think there's a real opportunity to, steady state. It's difficult to create. We need to do something significant ourselves to create a point of difference. But when the whole playing field is so messed up, being somebody people can rely on is okay. I think two key parts of business is it's results and relationship. And you can have great results, deliver brilliantly, but have poor relationships, and we've got a lost client. And similarly, we can get on really well, but if we don't deliver, that's probably a bit more obvious. We're probably gone. But it's the two things.
And something I repeat often with my sales guys is you don't build relationships over email.
Perfect. Agree. Well, pick up that bloody phone. Absolutely.
Yeah. Pick up. Yeah. That's it. Arrange that meeting. Do that. Even if people are objecting to it, that's where relationship built. It's in the rub. If it's a Zoom meeting, get on that Zoom meeting 2 or 3 minutes earlier, because the people getting on earlier are the ones you can have a chat with. And if it's if it's a conference call, be there first and stay afterwards and have that cup of coffee or whatever in the virtual world. because that's when the humanization comes through.
Yeah, absolutely, because we've got to have that relationship as well as the result. We can be the best, but if people don't like us, then we're not going to get the level of success we would have. Clearly, we'll get a level of success if we're seen as the best, but it's not. So speaking of, obviously, that's a great saying in sales, but what other quotes or sayings do you use or fall back on a regular basis?
Oh, well, definitely that one, you don't build relationships on the phone, but the current one I'm talking about is a ramp, not a cliff, because what usually happens in this business cycle, that in our electronics sector, historically has happened every decade. The last one was 20 years ago, and it's usually product driven.
Yeah.
So usually, like in the late 90s, smartphones started coming out, but there was an explosion of smartphones, and one before that was home computing. 90s, nobody had a home computer. Within about 18 months, everyone had one. So these things are product driven, that cause an imbalance in supply chains and spike a massive uptick in business for companies like us. So the last one was actually recession driven or the financial crash driven, because it was a liquidity problem where component manufacturers couldn't access the resources to get their components made, even though the consumer demand remained fairly static. So that was a little blip. This one, you've got supply chain problems, you've got COVID, you've got war, you've got all those other things going on that is causing this huge, and also the big one we haven't actually touched on is mass electrification. Every government in the world is incentivizing electric car production. And in a traditional combustion engine car, there's 6,000 semiconductors. In an electric vehicle, there's 60,000 semiconductors.
Wow. Okay.
And it takes 3 years to build additional supply, additional capacity in the supply chain. So you've got every government. Well, everyone sat at home in COVID. The engineers are going what they're doing. The companies are investing on R&D, and now you can design stuff on a desktop. You don't need to be in an office. So R&D is hurriedly like prototyping or making stuff up. I think it was Volvo announced that they were going to go full electric by 2030 or something, and their chosen technology partner was saying, "Oh, that's great, but you could have told us about it, because it's going to take us 10 years to get that capacity, because Tesla's in front of you, and this is in front of you, and whatever's in front of you." And then there was a fire at the Renaissance factory, which is a big technology brand within our sector. So all these things affect supply chains, and what happens is the market goes like that, which is what we've seen up to this point, and it contracts. And we're still doing exactly what we were doing before, but it just naturally contracts. And the idea is that we don't drop to where we were before. So our goal is to aim to drop to about 16 to 20 million. So if we started at 10, ramped up to 40, maybe next year, maybe the year after, but within 6-8 months, there will start to be a tail off. So it's a ramp, not a cliff. So what can these guys be doing on a day-to-day basis to massage that drop? Because they're all benefiting from it at the moment, in their pocket, the sales guys and the company overall. So that's the challenge, and that's what we talk about. So just because you think everything's going on in the world that's beyond your control, there is always something within your control that can affect the outcome. Yeah,
definitely. And it's going back to what I can control. I think it's Covey talks about the a circle of control, a circle of concern, and the gap is stressful, and so the bigger the gap, the bigger the stress. So either increase our control of that area of concern or reduce our area of concern. If I can't change it, let's not worry about it. And the reality is in business often is, if there's a significant change in the marketplace, it's a challenge. It'll be a challenge for everybody. So it doesn't actually affect us disproportionately. It's just a challenge we'll have to face. And if we can face and address it and solve it better than others, then actually, as you said earlier, it's an opportunity rather than a problem.
Yeah, fully agree.
So what would you say you've learned about yourself through this amazing journey?
That's always very uncomfortable talking about yourself, isn't it? It's very un-British trait, I suppose. I mean, I've gone from being, green by the first job I ever had, other than sort of bar work, and it wasn't really, it was working with my mate type thing, and it grown into this. I felt a few years ago that I needed to upskill myself, and so I went back to do an MBA at Leeds Uni, because I just suddenly had this massive feeling of weight of responsibility of the people we employed and their families, and being looked to for answers, and not having anyone to sense check what it was that we were doing or saying. And really, I needed a confirmation that we were operating to the level that I felt that we were operating. So I needed to know what best in class was. How are the best companies in the world operating? What is the latest and greatest idea that should be challenged or should be thought about, or whatever it is? What am I not considering? What is my personal blind side? So that I sent myself back to uni with having a 2-year-old and a newborn at home as well. I don't think my wife will ever forgive me for that. And also doing the business things. But I also wanted to emphasize to the company that we're a learning organization, and if I'm prepared to go back and put myself under that continual education pressure, even though I had no necessity, on paper, that's on offer to everybody. We really want to promote people who are passionate about self-betterment.
Brilliant. And so I guess looking forward a little bit, what does the future, you've touched a little bit already, but what does the future look like for you guys, and what are the challenges you face, if any, in addition to perhaps the ones you've identified?
The problem is recruitment, and it's totally responsible for Brexit, and maybe it'll soften a bit once people, the UK becomes more of a favourable location choice. But I don't think that's going to happen in the short term, because we take people on who aren't ticking the boxes of the required worker status that the government have set out. And we do have a visa issue status as a company, but the requirements for that are quite high in their basic salaries, and we tend to pay people younger that we can recruit and onboard them at a more reasonable level, because our trajectory to profit is longer in doing that. But it works, and it's worked for 18 years, and the opportunity is there financially and career-wise. But it's just that onboarding element, and we don't put too much pressure on an individual coming on at a certain higher salary, because they're going to have shorter time to prove themselves. So that's a challenge. That's still a placeholder at the moment about how we're going to overcome that. So we talked earlier about the brand and working better on how we present ourselves. So that's one thing. Crisis or issues that we can't control, we'll just roll with the punches on. And I feel we're in a consolidation phase now, and it's about shoring up and making sure that every department is resourced properly. We went through a rapid spike, resource where we needed to, but it was literally just firefighting. It felt like I was steering a tanker ship with a wooden spoon, with pirates trying to board. That's how I described last year, or the last 18 months. We really want to double up the languages per geographical area that we talk about, and then be more industry specific, gain expertise within certain industry verticals, and start becoming more specialist. And at the moment, we're a generalist, and I think that's the next iteration of the company. Brilliant.
Well, it would definitely be great to maybe come back in a year's time and just see where we are, because it just sounds very, very exciting. And just a few sort of simple questions before we wrap up. What would you say to anybody that was thinking of going into business right now, Matthew?
In general, any business, I would. There's never been a better time with resources and stories and learnings, and the world now, in terms of even banking support or business support functions, and the amount of apps out there. There's just so much to go out there. It's just do it. Just do it. That you can start and fail a lot quicker than you used to be able to, and then restart with those learnings at a lot lower cost point. I remember at 21 flying to the US with Andrew, the business partner, to get a demo on a piece of software. And we're sat there, 2 guys from Leeds, one bedroom, and this piece of software is like designed for 50 people plus, and it was on a floppy disk that was not floppy, a CD that we got, and it was like $50,000 or something dollars that we had to spend on this CD, and it was like an incredible amount of money. And we're still using that system now. It's actually the backbone of the whole organization. So, and it wasn't just a one-off, as maintenance, whatever it was, but the hell of an investment for this company at that age to do it. And they thought we were mad, in the US, and we're still using it now. And it's because of that investment at that point that we're reaping the rewards now, because we've got all that data held. We've not lost any piece of data from that period of time. So we're still gaining value out of our data from the early 2000s. And if we hadn't done that, other companies you buy a system to take you to this point, and then this point, and then this point. But resource for the way you want to be. Don't resource for what you need now.
Yes. Yeah. And we often say about recruitment, recruit when you can half afford them, because by the time you can afford them, it's too late. It's like, you always need to be ahead. Otherwise we'll stop growing. We'll stunt our own growth. Makes perfect sense. And if you started again, is there anything that you'd do differently, do you think?
No, I'll just try and do everything quicker. I think that's the standard. You can,
Love it.
I just run it quicker. To probably take more risks.
Brilliant. And finally, what would be the best advice you could give to an 18-year-old you if you could go back in time and do so?
Come and find me.
Come and find me. I like that. Brilliant. Well, Matthew, thank you so much. It's been absolutely fascinating. And as I said before we started, it's so great to highlight such great businesses on our doorstep and what we're doing, what we're achieving, and some really interesting approaches to the growth that you've delivered through things like the apprentice schemes I know you're doing, and really solving people's problems and having to overcome some even more significant problems than many because of the export situation and what's gone on in the last few years. So thank you so much for your time today, and it'd be great, as I said, maybe to swing by in a year or so and see how things are going then.
Yeah, fine, perfect. And just as a sort of a final part, I think being in Leeds has massively contributed to the success of the journey of the business. It's such a good city to have a young business in. It's got the right attitude of people. You can recruit well. People can live up here and have a good standard of living at a certain price point that's outside of the south or London or whatever it is. And I just think there's so many good growth businesses within our area.
Couldn't agree more. I'm coming across them all the time and I love it. It's just great to highlight them. So just one final thing, whether it's a customer or a potential employee, what's the best way to contact you guys if someone is interested in anything?
Our website, www.icblue.com. It's got a careers section in there. It's actually got some testimonials from existing staff about their journey, from the apprenticeships to other people. I'm on LinkedIn. We're always got an open door, and we're always looking. We're a people-driven organisation, and we employ for character. So the rest can be taught. Love it. Bang on. Well, again, thanks so much, Matthew. Thanks a lot. Bye.